Yes, very good to be here. I'm a bit nervous. I'm normally, in my job, I'm behind the scenes organizing events and stuff like that, so I'm not giving keynotes, so bear with me. My name is Nina, and I'm here with kind of two hats. So I'm a science communicator, but I also founded a biotech company last year. I chose this pipetting picture as my opening picture because I think me and my cameraman, we hold the world record of filming pipetting. So if there was such a world record, I'm sure we would have it. So this is what my work life looks like. So I look at biotech and science through the lens of a camera. I spend hundreds of days in other people's labs, and I get to meet researchers and professors and scientists of different fields, mainly biotech and biomaterials engineering, and I get to hear what they're doing, and I feel quite privileged that I have this window to this amazing world called science. I think this would not be a proper keynote if I didn't have a diagram, so I have prepared one diagram. So this is, I'm there on the other side, and the biotech scientists here, all living in their separate bubbles, happily, not really many times meeting, but my job makes these two bubbles converge, and the work in between is mainly quite uncomfortable. So usually the scientists that I interview and that I film are very uncomfortable when I do so. Not because of me, but they are uncomfortable being in front of the camera. And I can relate to that because I don't like to be in front of the camera either. So it's much better being behind the camera. But this uncomfortable, so I mean, it's uncomfortable for me too, because I need to learn very quickly what the science is all about. And sometimes I actually have to learn it while I'm doing the interview. And I need to be able to get on speed quite fast. But it's worth it. I mean, there's something extremely valuable and fruitful that happens in this interaction. And something quite mundane as just being in the lab, filming somebody pipetting, when you do it properly, you can elevate it to something that's actually quite cinematic and quite beautiful. And I still enjoy filming pipetting, although we've done it so many times. I mean, stuff in the labs are just, beautiful. Eppendorf vials, Petri dishes, they're all beautiful. Inoculating plates looks wonderful. I love the aesthetics of lab. But aesthetics aside, if you want to sort of elevate your science and tell a story, which is often quite complicated, you have to talk to a broad audience that doesn't actually maybe even know the basics of the science that you're doing. So, of course, the content comes first before the aesthetics. You have to be able to express why your science matters in the world, and it should be the big picture, but it should be the smaller picture. What is the context where your science lies? You need to be able to also explain how you're doing it, because science and technology, it's exciting stuff, and managing to explain that to a broader audience, that means that you are attracting interest also from funders and policymakers, and they're all part of the broad audience. They're not experts. So you need to be able to translate what you're talking to a wider audience. And then you need to be brave enough to say what can come out of it, what is the vision, why is the stuff that you're doing important. And then remember the aesthetics, because if we think about storytelling, why would you leave some form of storytelling out? I mean, we speak words and we can write things, but aesthetics is also a very, very powerful tool. And if you can go audiovisual, it's even more powerful. And what I'm a huge proponent of is going documentary style, so don't pre-script your stuff. Make it from your heart. Talk through things. Don't have a written script and then a camera, because unless you're an actor, I think you can pull it off, but it's really hard to do a scripted thing in front of the camera about your work. And you don't lose the control of the narrative, because when you work with a filmmaker, with science communicators, you're creating that narrative together. So it's all about controlling what happens. And when you're talking audiovisual, or if you're talking a film, it's a tube, it's a linear experience. So the audience comes in here and goes out in the other end, and you are controlling what happens in between, so you are controlling the narrative. I didn't always do science content. I used to do a history series for Finnish television, and in one episode I got to go to a lab and I got to interview scientists, and this was maybe in 2013, and I had been doing almost 10 years this history series, and I was just mesmerized. It was mind-blowing. I've studied philosophy, so I hadn't spent any time in labs, and I thought, well, this is something that I really want to do. And we created this series for Finnish TV called The Future of Finland, where we looked at the future of Finland through the lens of science and technology. And we got to visit hundreds of labs and meet scientists and people in startups, in bigger companies. And I was super happy and lucky to get Howie Jacobs, who was a professor at the time in Tampere, to be the host of our show, and he really was my mentor, so he taught me everything I knew, everything I know now about how scientists work, how labs work, what you should know when you go into a lab, and what are the things you should really be able to respect. And in the beginning, it wasn't very easy. This is like a happy picture after. Maria Yli-Pertola, who's a professor in Helsinki University, she was one of the first people I called up to get an interview with when we were starting the show. And I explained, like, oh, I'm a filmmaker and we're doing this show. And she's doing this amazing 3D nanocellulose-based cell culture medium. And I really wanted that in the show. And I was talking to her, and then she just abruptly said, no, I have nothing to say to you. We have nothing in common, and I don't want to be part of this. And I was shocked. I was like, well, why don't you want your science to be known to the world? And then I got her talking. I mean, she almost hung up, but she didn't. And then she said, oh, I had this horrible experience with actually 2 journalists who did stories on her work, and they twisted everything upside down. And when the story came out, she was super embarrassed because it wasn't what her science was all about. And I was really lucky at the time because Howie was on board that I could say, okay, but I'm working with this professor, he's a molecular biologist, and I'm sure, you know, I promise you we're not going to make this mistake. But it was quite early on, I learned that working with scientists, you really have to respect the content, and you really have to learn the content. You can't just go in and make your assumptions. You have to really understand what's happening. The series is still online, and it's subtitled in English, and the voiceover is in English, so you can actually watch the whole series on that internet site. But the pivotal moment for me as a science communicator was when I met this guy for episode number 2. We were doing a little piece about biotechnology. I didn't know much about biotechnology, and we're talking now 2014. And he explained he explained to me what synthetic biology is through this Lego brick analogy, which you've all, of course, heard. But in 2014, I don't think many people outside of biotech had heard about synthetic biology, let alone that you can put these bricks and just build cells, and the cells will build whatever material you want. And when I heard this guy speak to me in this interview, it just sort of fell into place. I realized that this is something that I want to probably work with for the rest of my life, because I had never heard anything so powerful that can change the world, like a technology where you're not breaking things apart. I mean, the way we extract oil and we break it apart only to build it back again, and suddenly you have this technology where you have these living organisms just building everything, just like that, without breaking things apart, except for sugars, maybe for feedstock. But anyway, so I was mesmerized. And then I got to meet Merja Penttilä, who's really the mother of synthetic biology in Finland. And she was excited that I was excited about synthetic biology, and she asked me to be part of founding the ecosystem of synthetic biology in Finland. And this was around 2017, and we got a small government fund. It was not $500 million, it was more like $500,000. But we had a few years to build an ecosystem and kind of get that in place. And the government funders told me, well, you are communicating the science, we want to hear success stories, so give us success stories. What can we do with synthetic biology? And at the time, we didn't have any startups. Like, we didn't have much of anything to actually tell, so we put together these scientists and designers, and we thought, can we do something in the lab and translate that into a product that looks like a real product, not like a sample from the lab, but that really is like something that anybody can imagine, oh, this we can do with synthetic biology. So we decided to make a pair of headphones because it has soft materials, hard materials, it has all kinds of different types of textures. And we did a lot of iterations, a lot of crappy things that didn't work at all, until we finally did manage to build a pair of headphones. And it was pretty cool because not only did we kind of replace things, but we used synthetic spider silk, we did biocomposite with microbes, we did mycelium leather, and then we did this biological hydrophobic foam and a lightweight composite. And this really paid off. Like, there was a lot of, it took a whole year to make one pair of headphones. But the media that we got was just amazing. So when the press release got out, it got picked up by all kinds of huge international media. And within just a couple of months, we reached 2 billion people through actual media, not like impressions, but real media contacts. And it continued. So the headphones have been traveling all around the world in exhibitions for like 5 years. Well, then the next challenge that I was, well, one of the challenges that I was presented with a couple of years ago was that we had a scale-up challenge. So we were starting to see these amazing startups and these amazing projects, but in Finland, we only had like 1 cubic meter bioreactor for scale-ups, and everybody was talking that we really need to go bigger. So I was then asked by VTT to communicate the need for our government funders that we need to have a scale-up facility. And we worked for almost a year with my colleague Sanna Taskila, and finally we got a green light, and then the government funding agency said that, well, somebody needs to do this, so who's going to do this? And they didn't want the research organization to build a pilot, they wanted a company. And then I said, like, okay, I can, I can make this company. And I then acquired the private funding to complement the funding, and now we're building a really fantastic scale-up facility in Finland. And being here in Latvia, I'm proud to say that we are building it with Latvian bioreactors. So Bioreactors.net is providing us with a beautiful aseptic line going from 50 to 27,000 liter fermenters. And returning to beautiful pipetting, perception does matter. It is important not only what you say and how you say it, but really how you put that to the world, and it makes a huge difference. And just like a last sort of nugget of completely irrelevant to what I've talked about elsewhere here today, I'm doing a documentary called Planet of the Microbes, and I had the great pleasure of filming in the US in January. And I visited Shiljadita Dasarma's lab, who studies extremophiles. And they showed me this salt crystal, and it looks like not much, and it has a bubble. So what? A bubble. That bubble, or this crystal, is 250 million years old. So it's from a salt mine. And that bubble has water inside that has been inside the crystal for 250 million years. And yes, there is life inside that bubble. And they were able to extract that life, a life form that has sustained for 250 million years, only to be cultivated in Baltimore, Maryland, and ready to serve in biotech. We don't know how, but if biology can do this kind of things, and then you put human ingenuity on top of that, I would say, yeah, the possibilities are limitless. Thank you.
You didn't seem so worried, actually, during the presentation. Thank you so much for a visually impressive and really interesting and engaging story. I have one question to you that made me curious. Yesterday, when we were having the BioCosmic stage, we had an 11-year-old girl on the stage, and she was challenging the experts in the panel, and they had to explain her and convince her to invest in the cosmic technologies or space technologies. And she challenged them to speak in a very understandable way for the teenage girl. So from your experience, what would you suggest are the most effective channels and ways to sell science to our young generation, like 10 to 15 years old, because they are the ones entering the secondary level and the university level soon? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I have a 14-year-old son, so I have my test audience at home. And we actually did, just for fun, we did a TikTok video on PHA with him. So he was just jumping on his trampoline and explaining what PHAs are, and it was pretty cool. And I would say, I mean, unfortunately, kids are on TikTok still until they ban it, and they watch YouTube shorts. So I would say that make the effort of doing something, and I would use kids to explain to kids, because I'm not sure that it's, or then you do a completely adult thing, because kids are just like adults. They want stuff explained in the same way. They don't want to be talked to like kids. So I would say, make a clear story, and you can do it probably in the media where kids are, so it should be quite short and it should be engaging.
So TikTok, YouTube, as the first choices.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Once again, let's say thanks to Nina